Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. Joining me on today's program is Matt Lewis from the Daily Beast. He appears all over the interwebs, too many places to count, but Matt, rattle off a few of them here before we get started.
Well, let's see. At Matt K. Lewis on Twitter, I write for the Daily Beast, and I'm on Patreon.
You are?
It's just Matt Lewis, so check it out.
Yeah. And you can see him wherever fine commentary is hosted. You're still on Blogging Heads too, right?
I am. Every week, Bill Scher and I do a sort of center-left versus center-right conversation. It's called the DMZ, and we've been doing it for like a dozen years now, and it's a civil conversation, and it's pretty fun.
Okay, so one of the cool things about doing Don't Worry About the Government as long as I have has been having like recurring conversations with people through the years. Like I was just talking to Sean Frieder on the last episode, and we talked about Joe Manchin. And he and I have talked about Joe Manchin like over 7 or 8 years at this point. Manchin has always been fairly high on like both of our radars, and we've had this big like running convo. What has been a running conversation for you and Bill over the years?
Well, there's definitely been a theme where I worry about how fragile American democracy is in this republic. And Bill is very, it'll all work itself out. We're very, he thinks America is very resilient. So that theme has been consistent. The interesting thing is that when we started doing Blogging Heads a dozen years ago, I was very worried about the left. And I was making these same arguments about they're tearing down institutions and we don't know where this is going to lead. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it, And then in recent years, it's been, I'm worried about what Trump is doing to the institutions. And Bill has been, again, consistent and like, America's tough, America's strong, the Constitution held, everything's fine. So it is funny how we've been consistent in our kind of built-in biases, but it's, but we've also been, I think, intellectually honest in applying them to both sides.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a fun one. I guess I think I come down a little bit more where you're at, and maybe that's why we're a little simpatico in the sense of I think democracy, like not just American democracy, but like democratic systems writ large, are fragile. And I think one of the ways that we often don't see the fragility of democratic systems is we go, well, but a democratic system is so much better than the alternatives, right? Like it's better than living under a general. It's better than living under, whatever the Chinese, whatever you want to call what the Chinese are doing these days. It's better than living under Vladimir Putin. But the thing is, in all those sort of strongman structures, they're kind of stable. Whereas democracy often ends in revolutions.
Well, there's also a lot of gridlock here. And I mean, look, I'm a big fan of Jonah Goldberg's recent book, where he basically argues that what we have is a miracle, whether it's capitalism or whether it is just liberal democracy, that we live in a largely peaceful, prosperous country is super precious, and it's a miracle. And it is actually not normal. Like there is a hunger in a lot of people, and a lot of Americans, and frankly, a lot of people on the right, on my side, there is a hunger for a strong man. Like the idea of, well, let's elect these people and we'll let them kind of do what they want for a couple years, and then if they don't get things done, then we'll go and we can vote them out. Like that's not a natural impulse. That is and actually, I think that this is something that dovetails with my faith, which is doing the natural thing is actually bad. Like nature, if I did what nature always wants me to do, well, not even me, if humans did what nature wants them to do, there'd be a lot of raping and pillaging, like even more than there actually is. You know what I mean? Like we live in a fallen world. And so I guess the way my worldview is that what we have in this country is far from perfect, but it's very precious, and we really need to preserve it. And here's the other thing too, where I disagree with my friend Bill Scher, who he stresses how resilient we are, and it's like he's right until he's wrong, right? And then it's gone forever. And I would say, like, shouldn't we err on the side, like, if there's like a 1% chance that the wheels could come off of this thing if we're not careful, like, shouldn't we err on the side of being too cautious? That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I to kind of build on your point, what I think about and why is the strong man such a resilient idea on both the left and the right? Because there's so many different ways where you end in what I just call strongmanism. You could go the Mussolini version, which is that right or left? Is that the perfect when he says the perfect merger of the corporation and the state? Like, what are we talking about there? Which direction? But the reason that strongman impulse is so appealing is because it's easy. And kind of getting back to your faith observation, doing what you were saying, the natural thing. I think a lot of times what we call the natural thing is the easy thing.
Yeah. And I think nature gets a good rep. Like, people think that we want to get to our natural state. It's a very Rousseauian idea. But nature is red in tooth and claw, as they say. We have created an artificial thing, which is a liberal democracy. And I think it is unnatural in some ways. And I think that that's part of the reason it's hard to preserve.
I really enjoyed Goldberg's book, by the way.
Oh, you read it too? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. No, I did a whole episode on it.
Cool.
Maybe to the slight surprise of my listeners, but like it's specifically because of the miracle thesis that he talks about. I really respond to that because I agree. I think, like, look, that Churchill quote of democracy is the best or the worst system except compared to all the others, or I'm ruining it. I think he's more like
it's called Suicide of the West.
Yeah,
is the name of it.
Yeah, no, it's,
sorry, I couldn't think of the title.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. I really do respond to it, and so that's why when I was watching the Capitol Riots on 1/6, which it is crazy, we are not even a month out from it still.
Amazing.
Watching that, I really did have this feeling of, whoa, we've gone through a door. I don't know that we've like gone off the rails. I don't know that we can't ever return. I don't know if we can't walk back down the hallway again. I'm not that much of a pessimist. I think we can still wind through this. But once you have people going into the Capitol in the middle of a pandemic, willing to risk their lives to try to find, like, I joke about it as the national treasure button, something like from the Nick Cage movies, where you can just undo the election of the 2020 election. And people really earnestly believe that because their political leaders, and in this case, even more importantly, the actual sitting president, tells them to believe that. And no one says, hey, that was all wrong. I don't know how we go back. I don't know how we walk back from that moment.
Yeah, and that's where I think this becomes a very unsatisfying conversation, because I don't have a lot of answers. I share your concern. I wrote, you've had me on this podcast before to talk about my book, Too Dumb to Fail, which I wrote mostly in 2015, and it came out in early January 2016. And I did have a lot of answers then. I was a warning against the Republican Party and the conservative movement and the right. Do not do what you're about to do. And at that time, I think I had, like, if this happens, this will happen. These bad things will happen. Or if we make this other choice, then they won't happen, and these good things will happen. I don't know that I have any
predictive text on that front too.
Yeah, but so I felt very. It wasn't just an academic conversation back then. I actually felt like I had diagnosed a problem and recommended solutions that, if followed, would actually work. And now it's more like, let's talk about it. But in some ways, the horse is out of the barn, sadly.
Yeah.
And getting it back in may not be impossible, but it's dramatically more difficult. And it's not just it's no longer a simple do this or don't do that. It's like, maybe if we spend the rest of my lifetime trying to, like, a generational struggle to rein things in, we'll preserve this country.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of nailed it. You've now. What's crazy is how quickly that door, or like that door closed. Door is a bad metaphor here, but there's an opportunity right after 1-6 to close the chapter of Donald Trump in some way. The Republican leadership, McConnell could have done the hard thing. He could have punished Hawley and Cruz in a meaningful way. He could have really tried to cajole the caucus to do impeachment. He could have been like, we're hot-shotting this thing. We're doing it this week here.
Yeah. They should have done it. They should have done a snap impeachment, because what you just mentioned that 1-6 was not even a month ago. It feels like years ago. I mean, it feels like certainly months ago, and it wasn't even 1 month. And I just tweeted about this morning. It seems like the only people who have really, the only institutions that have really checked MAGA are Twitter, who finally banned Trump from Twitter, and I think made a dramatic difference when they did, and Dominion, the voting machine company that's basically threatening to sue people for libel, and it's working. I don't know if you saw the clip from Newsmax TV that came out yesterday. It was hilarious with the My Pillow guy. That's kind of, you could certainly argue like the Georgia Secretary of State did, but it was messy and it was a grind. I'm talking about really bringing MAGA to heel. And those are the only two, because they had teeth, and Mitch McConnell and I think the Republican elites either didn't do what they had to do as adults, or just simply didn't have even the institutional authority to actually play hardball and dole out punishment.
Yeah, or they had let their institutional authority and their power sort of ebb away to MAGA. I mean, like, to your point, I taught on the show. I used the phrase "the Trumpy kayfabe," which is like this shorthand for the broad, which I'm sure you kind of already understand from a wrestling background.
Yes. Well, I think Josh Hawley was definitely kayfabe, right? I mean,
the black glove. You don't think he's showing the nation of domination?
First of all, brother, Hulkamania is the strongest force in the universe.
Wait. Are you telling me Ted Cruz might be working a gimmick?
I think so. And maybe that would work in the Texas circuit, back in the day. But he's gone national, and I'm not sure how it plays in the rest of the country.
He's gone national, and he also chooses to routinely juxtapose himself against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which on one level for his alignment makes sense, but on the other level, you also want to have outings that you end up kind of visually playing out as the better here. And Cruz kind of finds himself on the wrong end of those sometimes. But when I'm talking about the Trumpy kayfabe, I'm talking about how Trump creates this broad, all-encompassing narrative through lying. To be completely clear here, he lies his ass off, and you have to, as a Republican now, in the party, toe the line on most of those lies. I mean, look at how far we've gone from even Bob Corker. Remember Bob Corker? Who was actually kind of calling out some of the lies, or Bobby Jindal back in the day who kind of call out some of the lies. Lindsey Graham could only break the kayfabe for about, what was it, 2.5 minutes on 1-6? Yeah. And then immediately after that, he had to go right back into kind of towing the line here.
Count me out.
Yeah.
Then
but
15 minutes
today, I'll be back.
15 minutes later, he was, it's pathetic. It's sad. And it's super destructive too. I mean, what you're describing is essentially that we have created an alternate reality. And when I was giving credit actually to Dominion and Twitter, they're the only institutions I can think of that have actually forced MAGA to accept real reality. Like when the Newsmax anchor has to shut down the My Pillow guy and is forced to read a statement saying that there's no evidence or proof that the election was stolen and that there was any tampering with the machines and all that. he is being forced to deal with real reality. And that is such a refreshing and rare thing these days.
And it's kind of jarring, right? Like, I'm sure you saw the last month here, Alex Jones doing a similar routine against QAnon, where they like got a QAnon caller, and then they totally, going back to kayfabe, totally fed the caller to Alex Jones. And then Alex Jones gets on there's like, I'm so sick of QAnon. I'm not into any of this stuff. Like, and it like it doesn't make any sense. But
I saw so apparently you're down in Texas. I mean, Alex Jones like funded hundreds of thousands of dollars for the rally, the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. I haven't delved in. I'm curious, like, why did he do that? Do you have any idea?
Why did he fund the rally?
Yeah.
Because like that's I don't know specifically that, but like Alex Jones has been involved in like the activism sort of weirdo stuff since going back to like Loose Change and the Iraq War. Remember, he was kind of like one of the weirdo like alt-righters back when alt-right wasn't even a thing, involved in like Iraq war protest.
Yeah.
So I think Jones, being a conspiracy guy, sees that like this QAnon thing's essentially a competing conspiracy for the Jones narrative. So Jones wanted to be seen as simpatico. Also, Jones liked Trump. Jones was.
Oh,
like,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised that Alex Jones went to the rally or supports Trump. I was just surprised that he was like the main funder of it. Like, I just didn't know if there was any other, and there must be a backstory.
Oh, he does have a relationship with Roger Stone. I think it's underappreciated.
I had dinner. I had dinner with Roger Stone and Alex Jones and Jamie Weinstein in Cleveland at the Republican convention. That was, you want to talk about a surreal experience.
Yeah, that must have been a real surreal experience. Yeah, Stone has been a regular feature on Jones's program for the last 4 years. At one point, one of the weirdest moments of my life, at least watching podcasts, Roger Stone was hosting InfoWars. Like, Alex Jones is out one day, and I know, a sentence that I never thought.
And that goes to how surreal and weird things have become. I mean, it's hard to do satire. It really is. Look, Saturday Night Live, has had a difficult time.
Roger Stone's a man with a Nixon tattoo, and he's hosting the preeminent dominant conspiracy theory podcast of our time. And these guys, especially Stone, have regular contact with Donald Trump. Roger Stone got pardoned by Donald Trump on the way out here. So yeah, anyways, the Capitol riots, they're gonna be on my mind for a real long time here, and I think they're gonna color the first 6 months here of the administration. I think Biden.
Well, what's crazy is it seems very, very, very likely to me that Republicans, despite amazing, irrefutable, I mean, just stunning evidence, it seems very likely to me that Republicans are going to acquit, right, in the Senate. And that in and of itself is just amazing to me. And again, they should have had this trial immediately. I think there might have been a chance if you had it within a day or two. But I think
a lot of Republicans would have been on board with that too. If it had been done swiftly, if McConnell had marshaled the votes, I think, I think Republicans would have been smart enough to realize that this is as much about the Capitol riots as it is about shutting the door on Trump and moving past him. Would there have been some primary pain? Absolutely. But yeah, I think that was the right thing to do. You're not the first conservative I've talked to, and I've talked to a number of conservatives who kind of really wish that the nightmare had been over. And it's not. And I think,
it's like pulling a Band-Aid off. And they had to do it very quickly before people got more afraid of the base than they were of the rioters. And, there's this episode of How I Met Your Mother that I think about where, like, Barney Stinson somehow moves out to the suburbs. He can't live in the city anymore. So he goes to these bars and he picks up women. and then he tries to drive them like a half hour back to his house in the suburbs, and they sober up on the ride, so it never works. And that's what happened to these Republicans in a way. I mean, it's almost the opposite, right? But like, they needed to close the deal very quickly, and these Republicans give them too much time, and they're going to get cold feet and back out of doing. This is where the analogy falls apart, because the right thing to do would have been to impeach Trump and not to go home with Barney Stinson.
Yeah, don't go home with Barney, but do impeach Trump.
Is it Stinson or is Barney Stinson? Is Barney Stinson the guy from The Simpsons? Maybe I'm confusing the names.
When you
is
say
Barney the drunk?
When you say Stinson, you're making me think of the bass player, the guitar player from The Replacements, Bob and
His name's
Tommy Stinson.
All right, I'm looking this up. It's definitely Barney.
It might be Barney Stinson.
How I Met, and let's see. It is Barney Stinson.
All right.
Okay, I'm what's called unconsciously competent.
There you go. I'm barely competent most of the time, it feels like. All right, Marjorie Taylor Green. I kind of getting to your point here. Marjorie Taylor Green should have been an easy slam dunk. Let's move on from this one representative. We can have a special election. It's not going to change the balance of the House. She has said kind of decidedly beyond the pale things. We didn't even talk about like the metal detectors, but the fact that you can't get members of Congress to walk through metal detectors to keep everyone safe is really crazy right now. But Marjorie Taylor Green right now is, I'll read a little bit here from Politico, under increasing pressure to be disciplined by Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy because of her incendiary rhetoric. She has said things like, she posted one picture that's like the squad's worst enemy, and she's posted with a weapon. What was the other one? She actually, I don't want to get the phrasing wrong on this, but sort of alluded to violence being necessary towards Nancy Pelosi. In a not so strong way. And she was rewarded when coming into Congress with, she's on 3 committees, which is crazy to me. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. Does she have like any real legislative background meriting getting on this many committees as an incoming freshman congressperson?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, like I thought that was just like, I know that
she doesn't even know. Unlike, is it Boebert who owns like a bar called Shooters or something? Like,
yeah,
I don't even think Marjorie is to that level.
Like,
she seems like she's been a long-time activist.
Committee. Yeah, I don't. That's my thing. Is it's like, okay, so obviously her yelling at David Hogg and other Parkland shooters and kind of going back to Alex Jones, moving into Alex Jonesy territory with some of these school shootings. That's gross on its own level, but before we even get to that part, what has she even done to be on the education committee? Like, I know sometimes you just end up there, but.
Well, so, my wife's a political fundraiser, and, I think education is obviously very important, and it's ironic that someone who doesn't believe in a school shooting would be on that committee, right? It's ironic and disgusting. However, I think most people probably would not want to be on that committee. Like, that committee is not a reward. If your goal is to raise money, you want to be on a committee.
Ways and means.
Yeah, something more powerful. And so I don't think that that's exactly, even though it's obviously an important topic, I don't think it's what you would call a prestigious or highly sought after committee.
No, that's a good point. So right now, kind of to give the lay of the land for the listeners, there is pressure from the Democrats that if the Republicans don't do something to punish Marjorie Taylor Green, that they are going to remove her from, they're going to have votes to remove her from both of her committees.
Yeah,
which
I say go for it.
I think they should just go ahead and do that. But they have offered to McCarthy the opportunity to remove her from one of them himself. But going to your point about Trump, if McCarthy can't find the steel in his spine to remove Marjorie Taylor Green from one of the multiple committees she sits on, yes, decoupling from Donald Trump really does feel like an academic exercise, so long as he's still with us on this earth.
Yeah, it's so sad and pathetic. And what you have is, I mean, there used to be men. I'll say men. It's mostly men, because in the old days, men were basically doing most stuff, fair or not. Um, who would like, I was just listening to this podcast about the fall of Constantinople, and like the the head of Byzantine or whatever is like, I'm gonna go down with the ship. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna leave. It's like I'm, the shepherd should, I'm the shepherd of the flock, and like, there was a time when like
Like the
people
Roman
took,
conservatives, the ones who like, would take these noble stances and go down with the ship, the Catos and that sort of thing.
yeah. Like there used to be a time when like honor and toughness, where you would basically be like, I'm gonna like do the right thing, or even in the old days, like the old guy who, like, if some kid was mouthing off like on the street, the old guy who would come out and just give him hell and like rip him a new one. You know what I mean? Like there used to be leaders and adults who policed their communities, and you could imagine like people like Lyndon Johnson when he was the master of the Senate, or Sam Rayburn in the House, or even like Tip O'Neill. Like if some backbench Democrat got out of line, what would Tip O'Neill have done? It's like he wouldn't have, even if there was a Democratic president, like let's say Jimmy Carter, who, do you think Tip O'Neill would have cared what Jimmy Carter wanted? No, it was different back then. There were a whole lot of things different. They didn't have cable news. They didn't have Twitter. The political parties had a lot more institutional power. There were more sticks and carrots. But there were people who like took responsibility and did, and like if you didn't like it, tough. It's like you're off the committee, and it's like, well, but sir, you're violating such and such. It's like, hey, what are you gonna do? I'm telling you, you're off the committee. Get out. There was people who would do things, and now these Republicans, these establishment Republicans, are so wimpy, and they're just too cautious, too prudent, I would even say. They're wishy-washy, and I think Trump was right about that. He saw how impotent and inept elite Republicans were, and I think he exploited that, and he was actually right about that.
This is, I think, the thing he was probably the most right on, although he never articulated it quite out loud, which is that the reason why centrism has failed in this country is not because like people don't like the idea of running conversations with our liberal and conservative friends, as we were talking about here to start off the show. It's because of weak establishments, establishments that are scared to show some rigidity and show some backbone. Like, you still want a Republican establishment that is still authentically a conservative thing, but also is trying to defend itself. Same thing like with the Democratic Party. I want an actually liberal Democratic Party, but also trying to preserve itself. And with Trump, what he did first is he beat the Democratic establishment. He beat Hillary Clinton, and then he spent the subsequent 4 years beating the Republican establishment.
Yeah. I think it's...
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is like a cultural trend too. Like the inmates are running the asylum, and like that was the case at the New York Times when they fired like an editor because their millennial staffers were offended by something. And I think it's also infected the Republican Party. It's just like there are no adults, there are no leaders. I mean, the only people who really have balls right now are Dominion voting machines, right?
Right. No, it's strange. And like to your point, I get what I want rebalancing and like kind of a rearrival of the center, at least in my head. It would be something like elevating facts to being like, nope, Joe Biden won the election is the starting point for this conversation, not because yay Joe Biden and we're all gonna reveal our Joe Biden t-shirts, but because like, if we can't talk about Joe Biden as president and the sky is blue, we don't really have a beginning point for discourse.
And you know what really doesn't work is soft centrism or soft moderation. So like being a radical leftist or a radical right winger radicals by definition appear tough. They appear to be strong and tough because they're, even if they have a soft demeanor or temperament, if you want to do radical things, that's perceived as exciting and romantic. Centrism is perceived as weak, and so if you have temperamentally weak people pushing for something that is perceived as... So what works better is, remember Bill Clinton? Now, Bill Clinton today is just a shadow of the man he used to be. But in 1992,
what the Clinton brand was in 92,
yes,
for the listeners.
The young...
like Epstein Clinton. Yeah.
Elvis Presley, young, sort of the young Elvis.
Playing the sax, yeah.
That Bill Clinton was moderate and tough. And he did stand up at the Sister Souljah moment. He stood up and he did a lot of bad stuff. I think he's a bad person. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a very bad person. But he was that tough. He was an example of how you could be the establishment.
He was a cool centrist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really what it takes, I think.
Yeah.
And who's that today? Like Obama sort of was, but I don't know who is that today.
Yeah, no, right. I think Obama's the closest answer, but like Obama's off the political scene here. And yeah, like I think the reason you have a push towards more extreme politics, in my opinion, I think we're probably simpatico on this, is because of the weak center. It's because center politics is not offering satisfying enough answers or solutions to some of these problems on a general basis, that people are turning more and more to extremer politics and extremer answers. I look at the Capitol riot, and that's sort of my takeaways. It's like if you had an Eisenhower, you don't have a Capitol riots, right? Like Eisenhower's obviously just like an example here, but someone who's a strong centrist person who's doing stuff, and by doing stuff achieving popularity.
That was really like the perfect S-storm. I mean, first of all, you have a toxic political environment where there's all this disinformation coming from right-wing media, like in QAnon and conspiracy theories, right? That's a bad recipe. But then you have the President of the United States, like giving that like his imprimatur. And so that was really the perfect storm, I think, for this bad event, insurrection.
It will take years to unpack how Trump's kind of habitual kayfabe porting onto the QAnon kayfabe.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, it made this like weird...
I mean, if you were like in that bubble where you're listening, you're like reading Q every day, you're listening to, AON, Newsmax, Alex Jones, even Rush Limbaugh. If you're in that bubble that, cycle all the time, that echo chamber, and then the President of the United States, your commander-in-chief, tells you, like, hell, it would be unpatriotic not to listen to him. I mean, if he tells you that they are stealing this election, it's like, man, that's a.
How could you turn your back on him now? You've gone this far.
So I think that I would say if there is good news, that it's unlikely that we're going to have in the next 4 years that exact combination of bad things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it won't fully be appreciated for a while just how damaging it is to have the president be a constant source of misinformation. I know we've all said like politicians lie, and we're all aware of that trope, but like for the White House and the president to be an unreliable narrator on not just things involving their campaign or the reelect, but like the state of things in the world.
Part of the reason I sort of understand this is, like, there was a time when I just listened to Rush Limbaugh and believed whatever he told me. Because I thought, well, he knows more than I do. I trust him. I basically outsourced my knowledge and opinions to him. And then if I'm like, look, the president, we've been taught my whole life to like revere and respect the president. And if the president tells you something, it must be true. I mean, if I could imagine a scenario where a much younger, much more naive Matt Lewis, I don't think I would have stormed the Capitol, but I would have probably believed a lot of the bullshit that I don't believe today. So I can empathize with those people.
Charlie Kirk's and stuff, and you go like, there, but for the grace of time go I, sort of.
Yeah.
No, hey, look, I think sometimes I kind of do that time travel thing where I go like, how would I have shaped out if I was 10 years younger, if I was 5 years younger, because like it really does change. It changes your perspective. Time does inform things. I think generally in a helpful way.
Yeah, and it's hard to. This is sort of like saying like, would Muhammad Ali in his prime have been able? Would he have beaten Mike Tyson in his prime? You know what I mean? And it's hard to like say exactly because like time. We can't really ever do that. And so I'm like, would I have been stupid enough or gullible enough to fall for Donald Trump? I mean, I would. If Reagan said it happened, I would have believed him. But Reagan wouldn't have said it would have happened. Would I have believed Trump? And so I can't say for sure how susceptible I would have been, even when I was like that naive.
It's hard specifically with him because if you're of a certain age, he's just like, I'm 34. I knew who Donald Trump was. It feels like my entire life. Millennials and stuff talk about him being in Home Alone 2, but like he was a reference in rap songs. I saw him on WWE back in the day, in like 2006. He also hosted WrestleManias. Like everyone who Donald Trump was, they kind of knew him as like and so I sort of go like, if you knew who Donald Trump was. I've never been able to figure out what's that thing that you were able to shut off in your brain to kind of get involved in Trump the politician. Because all I've ever seen the last 5 years is the same guy I've always known. But I know people who don't see that at all.
I don't get it either. I think part of it is I've literally never seen the show The Apprentice. And I think that as much as I was right about a lot of things, I didn't appreciate Trump's appeal, and I assume it's because I never watched The Apprentice. I think that if you watch that show, and let's say that you're a working class white rural dude, and you haven't been following the New York tabloids, but like all of a sudden he's on prime time, and you're watching this show, and he looks like he has all the answers, and he's this great businessman.
He's edited to look smart all the time, and he's got the quick zingers, yeah.
And I think that I assume that was the disconnect for me, that I didn't watch that show, because if you did, he would look like a winner. He would look like, someone who might be a good president.
Yeah, no, editing is a powerful, powerful tool to make it. Yeah, no, it does.
Another word for that would be propaganda.
Yeah, no, The Apprentice essentially served as a form of. I mean, he viewed it purely as branding. But it also served as a form of propaganda, which essentially is what branding is.
Yeah, it's branding may be a nice word for it. I mean, I guess technically propaganda is the government, maybe is the difference, but
it's just a fine line, though. It's a fine line between marketing and propaganda.
Well, I think Orwell said, if you print what people want, that's propaganda or something. I'm butchering the quote, but yeah, there's a fine line between these things, and I think that when Trump used it, Trump was able to parlay it into the presidency. That takes it to the next level, maybe. But then again, look, I love Ronald Reagan, and being an actor certainly helped him become governor of California, which propelled him to the presidency. I mean, everyone uses something, and everyone uses.
You brought up Clinton
media
earlier, doing the Tonight Show or doing
Arsenio Hall.
Arsenio Hall, yeah, and playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall really I can't it's hard to overstate this for the listeners. Like Arsenio Hall was a very, very popular late night show host back in the day.
Yeah. Well, it was also seen because remember Arsenio comes on the scene at the same time as Carson is Johnny Carson's still there. In fact, there's a great in Living Color episode where they Ed McMahon has to tell Johnny Carson about Arsenio Hall, and then Arsenio's like winning in the ratings, and like Johnny's like, I did not know that. I can't do the Johnny impersonation, but it's you look it up on YouTube if you can find it. But Arsenio was seen as not only popular but cool and hip, right? And Carson was your dad's late night show, and Arsenio was seen as like just this on the cutting edge of hipness.
This is where Leno kind of ended up back 15 years ago, and like Conan was kind of the hip guy.
Yeah.
All right. And
Letterman was on at like 12:30 at night back then. But Arsenio also did something smart, as I recall. They put Arsenio on at 11 o'clock at night, so he came on, as I recall, a half hour before Carson.
Oh, that's sneaky.
And I think that helped. Yeah, that's my recollection, at least. I was there, I'm old. I'm old enough now that I know these things that are so
little things like
so old.
They matter. They used to matter so much, right?
Big time.
Big time. Getting that little jump on somebody was clutch. So speaking of getting the jump on somebody,
and I'm sorry to just
go ahead. Yeah.
To finish off that thought. I don't think people today could appreciate how much it mattered if Bill Clinton went on Arsenio Hall and played saxophone. Like how much
the difference between that versus going on Carson.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, those
it was a big deal.
When people want to study politics, like if you want to kind of get into like the history of politics, you got to kind of look at like moments like that. What would be an analogous one to like the 96 campaign?
96, I don't know. I know at some point Bill Clinton got asked if he wears boxers or briefs on I think by MTV.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Rock the Vote was kind of really in full swing in 96.
I would say
right?
Real World was a big deal. Like not necessarily in terms of impacting the presidency, but that's the first reality TV show in America. I think we have Rachel Campos Duffy still around. I had a big talk about a big crush. I had a huge crush on a young Rachel Campos Duffy, and she was a Jack Kemp fan back then, as I recall, and a Latina. So that's she's become Trumpy, I think, but back then she was kind of my brand of what a conservative was.
All right, so that is interesting. Like the Real World thing makes me I almost kind of want to revisit like the Real World and the advent of reality TV, because I think there's it's an interesting societal thesis about reality television and how it's sculpted us over the last
it's horrible.
5 years.
And we wouldn't have Trump without it, right?
Really horrible, right?
It's sort of like, would you kill baby Hitler if you could go back in time? Like, if you could go back in time and just snuff out reality TV, like that show, Real World Never Happens, is America better today? And I assume somebody else would have done it eventually anyway. But
yeah.
By the way, there's an old movie. There's a lot of movies that sort of got these things right. Have you ever seen it? It's a Stephen Dorff movie called SFW. Have you seen that one? It came out. I'm guessing it came out in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe late 80s, and it really, I think, sort of set the tone for what would happen with us with reality TV and alternate realities. And it's not a great movie, but it's ahead of its time.
It's fun to see certain ideas kind of kicked around, and I'm with you. Like I think the dangerous thing about reality TV is that it's called reality TV, except that so much of it is pro wrestling. It's a work.
It's not reality.
It's not reality, but we don't tell you that. And they go, well, that's part of the magic. Except that over 25 years, it creates a distortive effect that people think like maybe this is how life really is supposed to be. Maybe
You know what's interesting to me?
Wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean it's Instagram. If all you did was look at my Instagram feed, you would think I was awesome and you'd be jealous of me. But you don't see
Follow Matt Lewis on Instagram.
You don't see me using like the plunger, like what like real world stuff. Cleaning up messes my kids make. So yeah, here's where I feel like my life experience, college and life experience has given me a certain critical thinking that made me less susceptible to Trump than other people. And I think critical thinking is a big difference. And I have to tell you, being around TV, and many years ago I ran campaigns. And so like watching TV commercials get made, so like I'll give you an example. The other day I'm watching, I won't mention the candidate, but I'm watching an ad for a candidate. And the candidate is really giving this emotional, really it's a touching, emotional message. And there's like a scene of her, like, I don't know, reading the Bible, talking about it, and then going for a walk, and and it's a very if you're a normal person and you see, and by the way, I'm not saying she's a phony, I'm just saying this is, but if you're a normal person watching this video, you would be moved, maybe to tears. But because I've done commercials and been like on TV sets, I'm like, okay, here's where they told her to go for the walk, and then they said, look, the lighting's not quite right, let's do that take over. And then it's like, now your kids are open, we're gonna have your kids opening the Christmas presents under the tree. It's probably not a real tree, probably did this like in June. And like, I know what's behind, the man behind the curtain or whatever it is, right? And so like some of the magic is gone. And like, I think that like being in this business to the degree that I've been, in a way it takes away some of the enjoyment. Like when I watch a reality TV show, I'm thinking like, I wonder how they got that lighting right,
Yeah, no.
Or the producers must have told her, you got to come in and be mad that he called his ex-girlfriend, or whatever.
Yeah, and you can see, especially when you have reality TV shows that are done with like not great actors, like some of the pro wrestlers have reality TV shows, and those are really like, it's very obvious like when they're working, which is most of the time, and you can kind of tell what the stage direction is. I remember going back to the campaign videos thing. I remember several years ago, Ted Cruz upset someone involved in making his campaign videos. There was some sort of dispute between him and the person making his campaign videos, and the way the guy retaliated, I don't know if you remember this, is he put up the entire 14 hours of Ted Cruz doing all these campaigns, which was a hoot. I had that on, like, I might have watched nearly all of it.
That's so funny. The crazy thing is that we live in such a crazy world where that's the 1 millionth weirdest thing it's not even like a top 1,000. But I do vaguely remember that.
When you brought up the Christmas stuff, I just remember him being like, they were trying to do like the Christmas, like the holiday shot.
Yeah.
And he was being a total, surprising here, a total brat during all of it, kind of,
That's not the Ted Cruz I know.
No, I know. This is a guy who loves his wife, loves his kids, loves his family.
So, although there's a video where like he tries to hug them or kiss them or give them a high five. I don't even remember what, and they just like, they want nothing to do. I mean, that could happen to anybody, maybe, but
okay, so like, here's the thing that has changed a lot about me over the last 5 years when I'm like looking at politicians. Loving their spouse is much, much, much higher on my like calibration of am I even willing to give this person the time of day now? Because if I detect that the marriage that they're in is loveless, I kind of go like, if you can't even love your wife or your husband, how can you like love the country or any of us? Like, you don't even know me. Presumably your partner, you know that.
Yeah. It's funny though, what you're making an argument, It's not the same, but it's similar to the argument that a lot of conservatives made about Bill Clinton and infidelity, which is, you know, maybe sex doesn't matter, but if you're not going to, you know, if you're going to take this oath, you know, you can extrapolate that what you do in your personal life says something about the way that you are going to govern, and that those two things are related. And then I think the liberals generally argue that no, like these are separate domains, and that it doesn't matter, right? So in a way, you're not making a prudish argument. You're making more about love, but you're still making like the character counts sort of.
Yeah,
personal lives matter.
Yeah, no, for sure, dude. I would call myself a character counts liberal. I'm like an ex-Catholic too, so like faith by deeds, like that whole concept, like you are your actions. And so I do.
Right.
While I'm somewhat receptive to the.
If you are your actions, should you have to bake the cake?
What do you?
So like, you know the whole like. Should the baker be compelled to bake a cake for a gay wedding if he...
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
You are,
so
you know...
This is taking me back. This is one of my weird takes back in the day. But I had, like... I kind of didn't have a problem with the masterpiece cake thing because, like, while obviously I'm in favor of gay marriage and I would bake the cake, I think, yeah, dude, like... It's weird to compel someone to do something they fundamentally don't want to do. And I think anytime we're making people do that, whenever someone essentially takes a conscientious objector stance, and we believe that conscientious objection is of good faith, whether that's like not wanting to go to war or, I don't know, let's say you have a religious view that's like, I don't serve on juries. Like, I don't feel right to judge my fellow man. Like, that's earnestly your belief. I do think it's important for us as a society to respect that.
Well, it's just funny because, like, what you said a second ago reminded me of there's a Joan Didion essay, and I don't know if it's in Slouching Toward Bethlehem. It's in one of her, you know, kind of famous collections of essays. And the essay talks about... So, Joan Didion takes her daughter to like this art gallery, and they see, and her daughter comes up with this insight that like the artist is their work, and like whatever they produce is part of who they are, and they're inseparable or something like that. And now I think you can make an argument that someone who bakes a cake isn't necessarily an artist. I mean, Subway calls their people sandwich artists, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure if that qualifies. I'm not sure if a sandwich you make could be said.
Yeah, right.
But it's an argument.
It's like so. Then I guess the question, you know, if you go into we'll use Subway just because it's slightly funny here. Like, if you go into Subway and you order a sandwich, like, I don't think the sandwich artist should be asking me like, "Oh, are you Muslim?" Because I don't make sandwiches for Muslims. Yeah. Like if I can buy the sandwich or the cake or the television set and my identity background is not normally involved in this transaction, then it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, you know, how at the same time though, like
what if I come to you and you've and then I apologize for taking us down this rabbit hole.
No, it's fine. I've been
but you're a musician, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're a musician, and I come to you and I'm like, well, you know, it says here that you. And by the way, this is like a great Borat type joke. So Borat comes to you, and he says like, he wants you to write a song about throw the Jew down the well.
Yeah, right.
Record this. There's an ad here that says that you
record
that you record things, and will you record my song for me, please? You know what I mean? Like,
no.
Should you be allowed to say, like, with all due respect, no, I'm not gonna, like, I'm an artist, I'm not gonna record that song for you.
This is actually you bringing up part of what I was thinking about when I was doing my takes on Masterpiece Cake, which is, as someone who makes music for pay, and you can pay me, and I will write you a theme song, or I'll write you a podcast bed.
This might be a good time to say, you wrote and recorded the theme to Matt Lewis and the News, my podcast.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, and thank you for
you did a great job. By the way, I may have to at the beginning of it, at the top of it, if you listen to my podcast, there's people saying Matt Lewis, Matt, and it's like Anderson Cooper's voice and Bill Maher's voice, and I feel like
in there.
Are you in there? I didn't even know you were in there.
Yeah.
That is a hidden. Yeah. That's like when the artist, like the painter, puts in like a little, paints himself in. I had no idea. That's so cool. I think we need a woman's voice.
Okay, sure.
There's no, Anyway, I've been thinking about that. But anyway, I didn't mean to derail you.
No.
But thank you for that.
Yeah. So I write music for all sorts of people, and like I have thought about this, and when Masterpiece Cake was up, I was like, if someone came to me and was like, Borat, throw the Jew down the well, or like, don't make cake for gays, and Chris, I'll pay you $200. You just got to write and record a song that's, don't bake cakes for gays. Would I do it? And the answer is definitively no. I could possibly imagine doing it, and then like turn to people and go, well, I did it, but this separate the art from the artist.
That's, by the way, I mean, I just watched, I'm very late to the game, but, just a couple weeks ago, I watched the new Borat movie. And this is totally the kind of thing that he forces us to grapple with these questions,
Dude, I think, Who is America, the second season. If you haven't seen it, do see it. If you haven't watched it in a while, go back and rewatch it, particularly the last episode of Who is America, where he gets three conservatives and he poses as his Israeli like Spetsnaz character or whatever, like the special forces guy, and he tells these guys that they need to go into an Antifa protest and mark the Antifa terrorists. And he gets a guy to go and like actually like mark them, like put like a little, like, I'm using a guitar pick here, like put like a little marker on them. And then he pulls out a phone at the end of it and he's like, all right, now hit the button and the explosive devices will go off and we'll kill the Antifa terrorists. It's amazing and terrifying how far he's able to push these guys through the power of suggestion and kind of what we were talking about earlier, authority.
Well, then that goes to the famous experiment with the dials, right?
Yeah, the Milgram experiment. No,
right. And you actually know the name of it.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, dude, I talk a lot about people as heuristics on this show, and a lot of that comes from my own. Growing up, might surprise you, a few butt-ins with authority, like at the school
Me too.
level.
Yeah, it might surprise you.
Yeah. So like, I've authority's always fascinated me, and power has always fascinated me, and like, who gets authority, who gets power, how is power wielded, how do these things ebb and flow, and a lot of it, especially when we move into politics, is we just listen to the person above us. You listen to the manager, because they're the manager. Bill's been here longer than I am. I guess he's the manager, and that can be a very dangerous trap. And to that point, what I wanted to get around to close this out is this decoupling from Trump thing. So you're seeing there are guys like Adam Kinzinger, who I think Kinzinger is really doing the best he possibly can here, but he is one dude. He is one dude in one district and really has no leverage. And outside of him, and 9 others, and then also Liz Cheney, there's really no decoupling from Trump. And some of these polls have been just terrifying. Polling conducted from January 26th from January 22nd to the 25th by Morning Consult and Politico showed that 81% of Republican voters still viewed Trump favorably despite the Capitol riots and the former president's second impeachment. Moreover, 54% of Republican voters said they strongly held positive views of the former president. At leaving office, his Gallup approval rating was 34%, which on one level, you go, oh, that's low. Matt, you remember Bush left with lower approval ratings than Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's amazing. And I'll say this, though. It's obviously disturbing, the numbers and all that you pointed out. However, you know, what was there was a point, I think, where Republicans were probably all in on the Iraq War and Bush. His numbers were really high at one point. The numbers for George H.W. Bush were really high before he lost re-election. So I'm not trying to let the American public or Republican voters who were polled off the hook. What I'm trying to say is that people are very fickle.
Yeah, sure.
And they change their minds. And so, again, this is not me praising them because I don't think it's admirable, but just because they are supporting something bad right now doesn't mean that they won't throw him under the bus too at some point.
So what's interesting about Bush, W. Bush, not H.W. Bush, is that what took finally throwing Bush under the bus was the new brand. So it was Trump. Trump had to come out and say like the Iraq War was bad. It was like the first time like Republicans could really honestly kind of say that amongst themselves out loud in a public forum. They had the reservations prior to that. But like Trump actually said, no, like the Iraq War is a mess. It was a total mess, and Hillary voted for it too. But like it was a big mistake.
Yeah.
And I could theoretically see someone do that with Trump. However, it's tough only because
it'll take time.
Yeah, and Trump's also such a pugilist.
Yeah.
Bush at that when Trump was doing that, Bush was well into his painting career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it would take some time. It would take the right person who is the new kid in town, the flavor of the day, who's tough and smart and very popular at the moment. And I think it would take Trump either going away or losing a step. And you're right, he's such a pugilist, but he's also very old.
Yes.
And I don't think it's transferable. Like, I don't think his kids can punch back in his defense to the degree he could. And even if Trump lives for a long time, I think his dad lived into his late 90s or something. I think both of his parents lived a long time. Will Trump lose his step at some point? It certainly happened. It certainly happened to Joe Biden.
No, to your point, like a Donald Trump in a motorized scooter is not the same imposing figure.
I apologize for laughing at the imagery.
Like him coming out, like doing the helicopter. They treated me very unfairly, like in the scooter.
It is. I mean, it's sad to say, but you're totally right.
Yeah, no, like I think the steam is out of the engine there. I worry that maybe Ivanka ends up becoming better at attacking than we realize, and that it maybe is underappreciated. That she could.
She's definitely the most formidable of the family.
Yeah, well,
and then second in line would probably
Eric, huh?
No, and then I think second in line would be what's her name from The Five, who is dating Don Jr. I mean, she's probably
Hasselbeck.
No,
Guilfoyle.
Yeah. She's so I think that they're the best messengers for Trump, probably in terms of toughness and in terms of. I mean, Ivanka is really the double threat because she's got the charm and the softness and the eloquence, but also, if you're right, if she could sharpen the elbows too a little bit, that'd be quite the combo.
Yeah, and people would be scared to attack her too.
Yeah.
So I'm interested.
Watch out, Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio better be worried about. Like, I don't think that primary is a lock for him. If Ivanka runs against Marco, I think Marco might have some issues on his hands.
Yeah. All bets are off, man.
Yeah.
All bets are off.
So, I guess like lightning around here. I know it's way early. We know that Hawley and Cruz are running. Are there any other names that you suspect strongly at this point will be seeking the Republican nomination?
Oh, I think a lot of people are going to run. The two that I think are interesting are Larry Hogan and Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
The two possibilities.
Take me through, like, what do you think a Tucker Carlson run looks like?
Well, I think Tucker is, he's sort of he's Trump in the sense that he's famous, and he's an outsider. He's Trump but smarter and younger. He's like just a younger, smarter, better looking. Certainly in the sense of being younger, Trump. And so I think he's very formidable. He would be if he runs, and I think it's maybe 50-50 that he would run. But if Tucker runs, I think he's very formidable, and maybe is the front runner. My friend Will Ron, I had him on my podcast. Will and I both worked for Tucker for like 6 years, and Will had a great line where he said something like, Tucker's going to come out in the first debate and win the nomination before the audience knows which one's Hawley and which one's Cotton. Something like that. It was more eloquent than that. And then I think Larry Hogan's the other one that I find very interesting. Partly because, remember I was talking earlier about how you can't be a centrist and be weak? I think Hogan he's the centrist, but he's tough. And I think he's got kind of the Chris Christie swagger, which I guess we should probably mention Chris Christie could try again too, and I wouldn't write him off either completely. It could get interesting.
Christie would be really interesting because he is a really good attack guy. He does have, at this point now, some core resentment towards Donald Trump, which I think he'll be able to tap into on a debate stage. And like when he attacks Trump, it'll be coming from an authentic place.
Yeah, but I also feel like
he got
if
too
Donald,
close.
if Donald Trump dropped dead tomorrow, I think Christie's stock would go up in that regard. But Christie probably is still a little bit afraid of Trump in the back of his mind now, and he also was so at different points. Even though I know he has distanced himself, he was a sycophant at some point. So, but I wouldn't write him off. He's talented.
Yeah.
And again, if you're a liberal out there listening and you're like, come on, I'm like, okay. In a rational world, Christie probably wouldn't have it. We're talking about winning the Republican primary here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And primary, I mean, like, look, I think my liberal audience maybe will get into this. Primaries are not trying to figure out who is the best person to lead the party. It's not like the
obviously.
The winner of the primary is not. It's not a meritocracy. This is not an exploration of character merit resulting in the truest and most ideological tight fit for our parties respectively takes over the party. Like,
definitely. But I would just say, for this conversation about the 2024 wildly premature 2024. Everyone's going to talk about Hawley and Cotton and Cruz, but I think the two interesting people on very different lanes are Tucker and Hogan.
The other one I'll throw in there that I'm keeping an eye on, but I think it's Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, who has been going regularly on Tucker Carlson's show. Mm-hmm. Tulsi Gabbard, who has started modulating her language. She now talks. She's concerned about right-wing issues is really the best way I could put it. Yeah.
Her dad used to be a Republican in Hawaii, and it wouldn't. Nothing would say. I mean, the normal Matt Lewis would say, I see what she's doing, and if she tries, maybe she ends up as the running mate or whatever. But I can't even say that because nobody we live in such crazy times that anything's possible, and you could just never say never. Like the fact that Donald Trump won suggests to me I can't say that Tulsi Gabbard couldn't win. It just anything's possible.
No, she is. This is extraordinary, but she is my dark horse pick for vice president because I think whoever ends up winning the Republican primary, Tulsi Gabbard, the Democratic heretic, and if you have Tucker, the populist,
Tucker Tulsi.
Yeah, populist firebrand, and Tulsi, the Democrat, they sort of are selling bipartisanship, and they're sort of selling a form of centrism, but they're also decidedly not doing that.
I think it could be formidable.
Yeah,
and again,
I do too.
If you're an average liberal out there listening, you're going to think that's insane, probably. But
also Tulsi positioned herself against Kamala Harris, and. Yeah, she positioned herself against Kamala during the primary.
She probably took Kamala down more than anybody else. I mean, the the biggest hits Kamala faced on the debate stage were probably from Tulsi.
That, and then like also attacking Joe Biden and having the party turn against Kamala. I keep going back to Kamala Harris, man. She is. It's really underappreciated how cagey of a politician she is, because she could have played 2019 a different way and ended up with absolutely nothing and back in the Senate. And instead, she took a campaign, her presidential campaign, which was not going well, which was kind of getting beat up from both the Biden side and also the Gabbard side, and like was underperforming compared to Cory Booker. Like, she was a really, really middling to under middling politician. She realized that she was not going to win the primaries and dropped out and endorsed Biden when no one was doing it, when everyone else still thought they had a chance of doing it. And
quitting is underrated.
It is.
It really is.
Knowing when to sell high. Yeah. I mean, seriously, I think honestly the strongest like character endorsement I can give of her is it takes a lot of humility to realize.
Yeah. That may be the only example of something noble that I could think of, but you're right. It's also it's introspective. Mm-hmm. It's self-awareness and introspection and humility,
Yeah, no,
which is in small supply right now.
It's in small supply, not necessarily an adjective you would assume or associate with Harris.
Yeah.
On the upfront, but like looking back at the actions, and again going back to actions defining character, look at like it takes. There are other people in that race, Bernie Sanders, who stayed in that race long after they didn't have a chance of doing it. And I think Kamala Harris showed a lot of restraint, and that's kind of cool. Anyways, I think that's all I got. I know you got other things to do here today. Last question: when does Trump get his Twitter back?
I hope never.
God, me too, but I don't think it's gonna be never though, right? Like I feel like at some point he has to get it back.
I'm gonna say never.
All right, I'm with you. Let's put that one up in the air, baby. Matt Lewis, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, well, read my column at the Daily Beast and check me out on Twitter at Matt K. Lewis.
As for this show, our Patreon is patreon.com/DWATG. If you want to watch this episode and every episode, don't worry about the government, go and do that. As I announced on episode 5 or episode 502, one of the other ones, not 500. As I announced on that, every 20 episodes we're doing a call-in thing, so be on the lookout for that, so you can get on the Zoom call here. I want to be able to chat with everyone who's listening in the audience. As I mentioned on the previous episode, regarding stocks, if you are looking at GameStop Mania and AMC and that has caught your interest in any level and you want to learn more about markets and investing in a wise and responsible manner, please message me privately and I am happy to pass along kind of everything I know on investments so that you can make smart decisions with your money. Don't go chasing waterfalls, baby. It's not only true when TLC says it, it's just true every day of the week. Don't chase waterfalls. Learn how to invest wisely, and please feel free to use me as a resource. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Follow me at DWATG, and until the next one, bye-bye.